What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about some of my thoughts and criticisms of the so-called spiritual community, the spiritual sphere, whether that be new age stuff or it be ancestral traditions or whatever the case is, shamanism, any of that stuff. We're going to be talking about some things dealing with that, right? And I know that when it comes to things that people get easily offended by, their beliefs, their spiritual beliefs, all that is something that is very sensitive. So I will say that before I get into it, that I'm not trying to offend anybody, but everyone should be susceptible to criticism and everybody should be willing to at least hear out some of the criticisms that people share, because that's the only way that people tend to improve or become self-aware about what it truly is that they believe, and so on and so forth. And I think it's important to address inconsistencies. And we all have them. We all have things that we fall short of, things that we don't have the foresight to understand, that we could be doing something better than what we're doing now, or that we are doing something that is damaging to the very thing that we say we believe in, or that we strive to believe in or practice. With that being said, the biggest part to me when it comes to practicing some sort of tradition, some sort of spirituality is preservation, right? This is the preservation of knowledge and traditions that's passed down over centuries. And in that vein of preservation, some people lose the plot because they forget about self-preservation. They forget about the preservation of the environment around them. They forget about the preservation of nature itself, which many people that are in this sphere tend to claim that they're more in tune with, more in touch with nature. So in my personal understanding of things, if you are damaging any of those three things intentionally, that is an inconsistency, a quite glaring one, a very significant inconsistency that doesn't really align with the principles of preservation. And you see, a big reason that someone like myself left Abrahamic religions and organized religions in the past is because of dogmatic thinking, or saying one thing and then doing another, and being completely, disconnected from the fact that doing that very thing is counterindicative to your best interests. You see, to me, ancestral practices, traditions go hand in hand with self-preservation, with preservation of the environment around you, with preservation of nature. Those are connected to me. I don't know about you, but to me, those are all connected. So I cannot say that I care about my ancestral traditions if I don't take good care of my body. If I am sick or harming myself because said tradition says I have to use something that's going to cause further harm to a condition I already have, or I'm not willing to get better, I'm not willing to heal my own body, but I want to tell other people advice about what to do with certain things, but I'm not taking good care of myself, that doesn't make sense to me. Because if my ancestors have the best intention for me, I would think that part of that alignment would be to take care of myself, to exercise, to eat right, all of those things. And so I can't understand people that follow a so-called traditional path but do not take good care of their health. Then you have the preservation of the environment around you. You see, a lot of people use a lot of synthetic materials, a lot of things that are not really in alignment with healing and nature and all those things. By you choosing to use these synthetic things that, get out into the environment and cause a bunch of damage to the environment, it doesn't really align with, again, the preservation of things. Because again, the core belief, the core foundation of all traditional beliefs of all peoples around the world, for the most part, is centered around preservation of everything from the beginning to the end, beginning from the smallest thing to the largest thing. And so when people are giving offering to a water source, for example, to a river, to a lake, to a ocean, but you're putting things that have glitter in it, you put in plastic wrappers of candies and plastic bottles and all this kind of stuff into the ocean, into the rivers, into all of these bodies of water you say that you worship, right? That you say that you care about, right? You see, you're giving these offerings and you're damaging the very thing that you are offering to. And the way that you get repaid is with poor health. That's just my observation. Because not only are you damaging the water source, you're damaging all of the life in that water source. And so said entity or whatever it is that you think you are offering to is going to reward you with bad health. You know, that's just what I think is the equalizing karma in that. And so that's why a lot of people that tend to practice a lot of traditions and stuff, that's part of the reason why they are not usually in good health. And like I said, that to me, this doesn't make sense. Because at the end of the day, if you are given 1,000,000 offerings and 1,000,000 able sacrifice everything, that's great. But you're also not going to reap the full benefit of those things if you are damaging the environment you live in. If you are damaging the environment you live in, secondarily to damaging yourself, right? Because if you think it's acceptable to give something that is unnatural, that is going to harm the environment, harm everything around you, if you think that's acceptable to give as offering, then you must use stuff like that all the time. That's also going to damage you. So in turn, it's just a sickly cycle of harm instead of preservation. And I know this may seem nitpicky to some. It may seem like I'm trying to make rules about things, but to me, it's just rooted in logic, which again, if you get too woo-woo with anything, just like any other religious group of people, you know, that are very dogmatic in their thought and principles, they can't think outside of what they've been told, and they follow this and follow that, and they don't really see the consequences of any of that stuff. You do the same exact thing. To me, that defeats the whole purpose of following any sort of ancestral veneration or ancestral traditional beliefs. It just doesn't really make sense to me. The AI, I can make a whole video about it on its own. You know, I understand that we don't live in the same time period that our ancestors did. I'm not saying that we can't use any technology for anything, but we should be more mindful about the decisions we choose to make with technology. And when it comes to AI, the overt use of AI, the abundance of use of AI is only damaging the environment, right? Because it's using up all the water. It's affecting, you know, because they're cutting down a bunch of places to put up these data centers and all this stuff. I mean, I don't see how that falls in alignment with, you know, what's more important, the AI for your marketing, for your business, for your, you know, the things you're trying to sell or whatever, or the environment that you say that you care for, the environment that you say that you want to preserve. And I get it, you know, we're all human. We're all curious about AI. You know, everyone has used it at some point to see what it can do, right? I had my time when I wanted to see what it could do. But once I realized it wasn't really worth it to use it, I stopped using it. Because another thing too, you know, being in touch with myself, in touch with the universe, in touch with nature, all these things. Real art comes from artists, comes from the soul, comes from the mind, comes from the human spirit. I can't give that away to artificial intelligence because, for one, it'll never be as good because it doesn't have that soul in it. That goes for everything. And so that also touches back on the whole synthetic materials and all that stuff, plastic water bottles, all that type of stuff. You know, you trying to sell me stuff with plastic in it, I'm not going to use it because that doesn't fall in alignment with what I believe is preservation, which, you know, in order for me to preserve my health, preserve my lineage, preserve the environment around me, and preserve nature, I can't use that stuff because it doesn't fall in alignment with the overall mission, the overall objective, which is to get back in touch with nature, to learn how to do things for yourself, learn how to get in touch with your inner mind and express yourself to the fullest capabilities and truly discover who you are. And how can I do that if I outsource everything from my creative side to be sourced to AI? And I get it, not everybody has the same abilities when it comes to art, right? But there is something that everyone can do. And it's important for you to find out what that is. And you can't do that if you outsource everything to AI. But nonetheless, to get back to the overall theme of the video, I understand every single individual has their own way of seeing things and practicing things. All I'm saying is that we should really reconsider what it is that we want to preserve or are attempting to preserve, and what does it really mean to want to preserve those things? Because you can't be too up in the clouds. You got to have some sense of rationality, which is why, again, I can't get down with dogmatic religion. You're suffering from the same problems that affect those people in their inability to conceptualize what harm may be caused by their actions or their words. You're doing the same type of deal. So that's just something I wanted to point out. I really can't understand people pouring tons of plastic and glitter and all kind of stuff into bodies of water and thinking that that's good for nature. I don't understand. Again, I don't see how you don't make the correlations, but you should think about it, because yes, we may have done things similar like that in the past, but guess what? Prior to industrialization, the stuff that our ancestors used was all pretty much biodegradable. It was all made of natural materials and would, become part of nature seamlessly. If we can't imitate that or put in the time and effort to imitate that and recreate that, then we shouldn't do it at all. Because ultimately, I'm sure that those spirits of nature will thank you much more to save up your time and money into using things that are in alignment with nature and can be degraded by nature naturally, can feed nature naturally, than you pumping out millions of sacrifices and millions of offerings and all these other things that are damaging nature. Again, you do with that what you want. With that being said, let me know what you think in the comments. I respect everybody's freedom to believe in what they want to believe. But then again, if you're going to say one thing, you're going to do another. I'm very critical of myself, and I'm always analyzing myself and seeing ways that I can improve and be in more alignment with my overall goal, which is preservation of self, environment, and nature, which to me fall all in line with what my ancestors would have wanted for me, right? They would have wanted me to be healthy. They would have wanted the things I use to add to my life, not take away from my life. They would want for the earth that I live in to have clean water, to have clean air, to have clean everything, So it's just something to think about. Again, let me know what you think in the comments. Appreciate you for watching. Catch you guys on the next one. I said.